Hey guys, we're here in Texas at the Texas Motor Speedway doing our, well, I hope, annual year-end roundup of all the news that was and all the news that will be in the EV world. And as always, I've got our EV expert, Anton Wallman. And Anton, why are you wearing a Chevy hat?
Because we're here today with Chevrolet to take a look at some of the old and some of the newer trucks that are coming out.
Yeah, and so I thought it'd be a great time to kind of take a quick look back at what was and take a quick look forward at what will be. So what happened this year in EV news? What would you say was the biggest news?
Well, the Bolt, the Chevrolet Bolt EV, clearly achieved volume production. It ended November shipping approximately 3,000 units per month into the United States alone. Of course, it is also sold in other geographies, but the US is clearly the bulk of the deliveries. And then just this week, Roman, we believe that Tesla made its first delivery of a Model 3 to a non-employee and a person who is not affiliated with the company. Tesla had delivered a few hundred units to its own employees and a few friends of the firm. And now we believe it's going outside of that, so they are going to likely cap off the year delivering several hundred vehicles before the end of December. And then, of course, more to come in the first quarter and beyond.
That's a far cry from the 5,000 units that Elon Musk promised, but finally they're starting to roll out. Now, this week as well, there was a program for the new Leaf, right? The new Leaf is finally hitting showrooms.
That's right. The new Leaf is hitting US showrooms in January. It started selling in Japan on October 2nd. And of course, the Leaf, unlike the Tesla Model 3 and the Chevrolet Bolt, is made in 3 factories around the world. Production started in Japan back in August or early September, and it continued in the United States here just in the last few weeks, and it will be starting to be made in Europe here in the next few weeks.
Yeah, and I just got a chance to drive the Honda Clarity EV, as well as the fuel cell and the hybrid. And of course, the fuel cell and hybrid, the hybrid's available around all 50 states, but the EV will only be available in California and in Oregon.
Yes, right.
89 miles, it's not up to kind of the 250 miles that the Bolt has, but there are a lot of EVs coming. But let's kind of turn around and look forward. What's going to happen in 2018, Anton? What's the big news?
Well, I think, the Nissan Leaf clearly starting to sell early in the year. They have a product which gives you about 150 miles of range, which is a little bit more than the Volkswagen e-Golf, which is at about 125, but significantly less than the Chevy Bolt and the Tesla Model 3. So Nissan would like to make the argument that they are in a bit of a white space. In other words, an area of the market where nobody else resides presently. So, 150 miles versus 125. Will people really care, and will people be able to compromise on whatever other deficiencies that they see in the product?
Yeah, I mean, it is cheaper than the Bolt. You do get 100 miles less of range, but you do pay about, $6,000 less?
That's right. On the other hand, the base Nissan Leaf doesn't come with, say, Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, so some of the things that are standard on a Chevy Bolt are not available at the base model of the Nissan 3, so you'll have to pay another $3,000 or so to get that and a few other things. So the comparisons are not exact, so it really depends on what you prioritize, but Nissan clearly gives you the most number of miles of EV range for a base price of $30,000.
Now, of course, Tesla has kind of owned all the buzz in the EV world, but that's about to change, right? I mean, Jaguar had an electric car running around at the LA Auto Show, and very soon we're going to see an all-electric Jaguar. Yeah,
so really the next car that is coming out that's significantly different than all the others is really the Jaguar I-Pace. It is supposed to hit at the middle of 2018. It is going to be made in Austria, in the same factory complex where the Mercedes G, one of your favorite vehicles, is being made, as well as the Jaguar Ipace in Graz. That's right. And the Jaguar Ipace, of course, is the smaller version of the F-Pace. So Jaguar is now going to be making these new SUVs, both the electric and the non-electric ones. And the I-Pace should arrive here by about July.
Anton, I had an epiphany when I was driving the Clarity, and as you recall, the Tesla Model S came out in 2002, right?
That's right.
And I think you need 2 things.
2012.
2012, yeah. And you need 2 things to make an electric car desirable. I think you need to make it fast and you need to make it sexy. And for 5 years, none of the major manufacturers have been able to do that, right?
That's correct.
All the electric cars have been slow and kind of ungainly and ugly. But now, finally, with the I-Pace, we're hopefully going to get something that is lustworthy.
That's right. So I would argue a third ingredient to the successful equation, though, and that is a robust charging network. So far, I would argue that Tesla has had really the only one that has had an intelligent and robust charging network. But what we're going to see here in 2018 is arguably one of the most important things ever in the history of the electric vehicle, and that is the emergence of an open network for electric chargers, and that is going to be put out there by Electrify America. Electrify America is the entity that was created by Volkswagen as part of the settlement for Dieselgate, and they're going to be spending $2 billion over 10 years, so $200 million per year, and we will see the first of these stations being launched here very, very soon, just in the next few weeks and months.
Yeah, and there's been kind of a fracturing of the different networks, right? So we've got the plug, which has been standardized, but not the network. So if you have a BMW, you can't plug in at the Tesla supercharger. If you have a Tesla, you can't plug in at the BMW. I mean, it's just, it's become this kind of, everybody owns their little bit of EV charging territory, and that makes it very difficult for people because now you've got to find the right charger for the right car.
Yeah, you basically need to typically get like a card or an app that will work with that particular network.
Tesla chargers only work with Teslas.
That's correct. That's correct. And Teslas, though, can charge at other networks. So, for example, if you get an adapter, you can charge at a CHAdeMO DC fast charging unit. Very few people bother with them, but you can do it. And certainly for AC charging, kind of the slower level 2 charging, every Tesla comes with a small adapter. It's hardly even visible. You just plug it in and it works. So you can do that. But 2018 with Electrify America will really create another network that will enable sort of really long distance driving on these long stretches between the states.
We were talking with Alex from Alex on Autos, and he made a good point. He said, it's like if you had a gas-powered car and you had to have a special funnel so that you can fill it up at the gas station. It's crazy. It's crazy. All right, so we've got the Jaguar I-Pace. It's fast. It's kind of a crossover.
Correct. It's in the center of the market. It's in this sort of somewhere between compact and mid-size SUV crossover. So it's not all that tall. It's not all that long. It's strictly a 2-row crossover SUV. So think of it as a little bit of a lower Audi Q5 maybe.
And it'll compete with the Model S. I mean, it's not going to be that inexpensive. It's not a Model 3 competitor.
Jaguar simply hasn't set the price yet. I mean, all of these car makers now engage in this lingo where they talk about they're just simply going to be competitively priced. Much of this has been dependent on what were the government subsidies were going to be. What was it going to take to compete with both the Tesla Model S as well as the Tesla Model 3 that is now starting to ship in meaningful volume in the early part of 2018. So you've got these objects of comparisons residing in a legislative landscape that has been uncertain. And just yesterday, Congress looks like it's going to moving a bill that will keep the $7,500 EV tax credit for just basically unchanged compared to what it has been for the last few years.
Yeah, I think that, along with the fact that people can get into the HOV lanes, is what's driving a lot of early adopters to get into electric cars, because let's face it, they still have a long way to go until they can compete with traditional combustion engines. Yeah,
and the other factor that changes in any case, starting here in the beginning of 2018, is that the so-called ZEV mandate, ZEV, Zero Emissions Vehicle Mandate. These are the 10 states that are essentially led by California. So it's California, Oregon, Washington, and mostly the northeastern states, somewhere between Boston and Washington, D.C. So there was a provision in this thing that was in place from 2015 through 2017 called the travel provision, and that had nothing with you traveling. What it had to do with was that you could satisfy your requirements to sell a certain percentage of the cars being pure EVs in just a subset of these states. So some of these automakers,
West Coast, basically.
Yeah, they basically sold them mostly in California, and you didn't sell them in Massachusetts or New Jersey. But starting here with 2018, depending on what you did in the last 2-3 years, you are now going to have to sell a greater portion of your EVs in those states. So if you look at those states, they're cold. Many of them don't have state incentives for EVs. Many of them don't have carpool lane incentives. So it's tougher to sell EVs in those states. So what is that going to mean as we get into 2018? It's going to mean that the automakers are going to be discounting the EVs very heavily in those states. So if you live in New Jersey or New York or Maryland or whatever, chances are you're going to be able to buy or lease an EV at unbelievable prices in 2018.
Now, the flip side of that coin, of course, is that probably electric car prices are going to go up in California because now they can sell them in other parts and they don't have to discount them.
All other things equal, that would be true, but there are also other things that are changing. The overall water level, as it were, of the requirements are going up in 2018. So it's not entirely clear what is going to happen with the prices in California yet, because if the only thing that changes was that some of these units would be sold in the northeastern states as opposed to California, Oregon, and Washington, that would be true. But we simply don't know the full effect of all of the other things that are changing to that legislation in 2018.
Now, we had companies like Faraday make a big splash a couple of years ago, and in 2017 they seem to completely have melted down.
Yeah, so Faraday, of course, has been a very sorry saga here in the last 15 months where they essentially ran out of money. Many of management have left, and it's not clear what else is left there. So I think we can pretty much write them off for the moment. There are many of these other startups, many of them where funding is a bit unclear. What we've learned even from Tesla, which has been sort of successful in terms of the fact that it's sold over 250,000 cars in total globally since inception now, is that they've never turned a profit. And some of these other automakers that have essentially raised a lot less money than Tesla has over the years are facing the same challenge, and that is, how do you turn a profit? And there are many of these startups, Lucid. You have numerous of these. You have a new company that is going to make a big splash at CES this year, and probably several other Chinese companies, right, that are somewhere in the process of making cars either in China, in the United States, or a combination of both on different timelines, but they may only have secured a few $100 million worth of capital, and it's going to take them better part of $10 billion to be able to get off the ground.
And after the Jaguar I-Pace, of course, you've got Audi and Mercedes that's going to...
That's right. I would say that it's speaking just in a matter of a timeline.
Yeah.
I think the way it plays out is this. In the middle of 2018, we get the Jaguar. In October of 2018, we get the 230-mile range version of the Nissan Leaf. That is going to be very significant if you think about competing with Chevy Bolt and the Tesla Model 3. And then in short order thereafter, in November of 2018, we get the Hyundai Kona EV, which is sort of a crossover subcompact, probably, I'm guessing, only front-wheel drive, but should be a very popular body style. And then at the very tail end of next year, December 2018, Audi should start delivering the Audi e-tron in Europe, and probably a month or two thereafter, early Q1 of 2019, also in the United States. So we've seen what that concept car looks like. They've started showing that over 2 full years ago, and we know the final production version is going to look very similar. It's going to be a very beautiful car, very similar to the Jaguar I-Pace, which in turn is going to be very similar to the Mercedes EQC, which launches probably third quarter of 2019.
And you put your finger on a kind of a dark horse here in this race, and that is, of course, Hyundai and Kia, right? One of the more popular plug-in hybrids right now is the Kia Niro, which is just,
just came out now, yeah. So in terms of just a plain hybrid, which is not a plug-in hybrid, the Kia Niro has, so it has outsold the Hyundai Ioniq by approximately 3-to-1 so far since it launched in the spring.
And that's because it's a crossover thing, right? It's
yeah,
tall,
it looks a little taller. It's a boxier, a little taller, sits 1.5 inches more off the ground. It's basically in the direction of what people want.
And same hybrid system, same drive.
They're essentially identical under the skin.
One is more of a sedan, one is more of a crossover.
So now both the Hyundai and the Kia are coming out with plug-in hybrids of these two versions. They're basically hitting dealerships right now as we speak here in December. And in the Kia case, it's 26 miles worth of EV range, after which the gasoline engine kicks in. And in the Hyundai case, it's 29 miles before the gasoline engine kicks in. And they should be priced very competitively. It's sort of saying, well, if you want to save a few $100,000 from buying a Chevy Bolt. You're getting a car here that's a bit more spacious on the interior, and you're saving a few $1,000s.
And Clarity is coming out. Actually, it's out right now. $33,000 for a plug-in Clarity.
That's right.
It gets
47 miles of
range.
EV range, which is again very competitive. So it's closer to the Chevy Bolt than Hyundai and Kia do, and the car is larger, right? So it's a very more expensive.
5-passenger car.
It's a 5, and it's a very spacious interior, somewhat upscale too. We can discuss what you think about the exterior styling, but basically, I think that in terms of just buying on the specs, the Honda here is very, very competitive.
And it's being sold not just in California, but in the whole country, and it's available right now. And then, of course, the top end one starts at like $37,000. So it's not,
but that's still very competitive with Chevrolet.
That's
very competitive.
And it kind of makes you wonder where Toyota is, because Toyota has not doubled down; they've tripled down on pure hybrids, right?
Well, Toyota right now, I mean, they are tops in the sales column, right? Because if you look at first worldwide sales of plug-in hybrids, they've got the best-selling one,
Prius.
which is the Prius Prime. In the United States, it is essentially tied with the Chevrolet Volt. They both sell on the general order of maybe 1,800 units per month in the United States. So we'll see how that changes as we get into the new year, and both of these vehicles get new competition from Kia, Hyundai, and Honda. So maybe the market just simply expands.
You know, Honda said something interesting when I was over there. They said they're going to put their money on all three potential power drivetrains, right? So they're going to have an Eevee, they're going to have a plug-in hybrid, and they're going to have a fuel cell car, because they're saying we're not sure which way the wind is going to blow, which way the trees are going to fall. So we're going to have all three, and if it's the Eevee that ends up winning this race, if it's the fuel cell or the hybrid.
That's right. So the companies that have that strategy are Hyundai, Toyota, and Honda, Hyundai, and Toyota, right? Honda and Hyundai sometimes. So basically, some of them just have those powertrains in the exact same body. And in the case of, say, Hyundai, the fuel cell, which will be in its own crossover. They're going to show that very shortly, and it will be on sale, I think, at the very end of 2018. But that's a beautiful crossover, sort of similar to a Jaguar I-Pace or equivalent. So they just don't put them in the same body as, say, the Ioniq, which carries the pure EV and the plug-in hybrid. So these companies have slightly different strategies. Toyota, for example, their EV will not be out until sort of late 2021 as a 2022 model. So they're several years behind in terms of a pure EV. But I think we can be pretty sure that when Toyota does finally come to market in late 2021 as a 2022 model, I have a funny feeling that their battery is going to be a very significant breakthrough, which will be able to handle cold weather a lot better, face less range degradation, and maybe even have simply better performance, that you can get maybe one of the first cars to do maybe 400 miles of range. I mean, when they come to market with a next generation battery, keep in mind Toyota's been in a partnership with Panasonic for 20 plus years now.
Panasonic and LG are the two main battery manufacturers.
And Samsung, yeah, and SKI, and then in China, CATL. So if you want to sell in China, you have to do so duty-free in China, right? You have to do so using a Chinese-made battery.
All right, last two questions. Number one, what's your money on? Electric, hybrid, or fuel cell?
Well, depending on the geography, so depending on what the government incentives are, you can make a case for either of them, because where government incentives go, so does the consumer. So if the consumer is going to be paid, as in Norway, up to the equivalent of $138,000 to buy a pure EV, they're going to be buying a pure EV. But if some other government in some other geography is going to have strong incentives for a plug-in hybrid, they're going to be buying those. So in the 10 states in the US that are the ZEV states, the incentives are heavily tilted toward pure EVs. So you have to say that for those 10 states that are constituting approximately 40% of the US population, you're going to see a very heavy pure EV mix.
All right, and the last question, what electric, hybrid, fuel cell car are you the most excited about that's coming, let's call it in 2018?
At some point, you sort of have to say the Jaguar I-Pace, because it is going to be a truly premium vehicle that we know it's going to look so good, right? So when you combine, as you said earlier, great looks with the most popular body style, with strong performance of 0 to 60 at, they say, 4 seconds, it's probably going to be below 4 seconds, and probably in the neighborhood of 250 miles of range, I have to believe that that is going to be a very popular contender.
Well, guys, thank you for joining us. Anton, thank you for your expertise. You are going to become more and more important, I foresee, looking into the future as the years and months go by, because, you know, we're just still at the very early days of electrification, fuel cellification, if that's such a word, hydrogenization. But
the future is electric, Roman, at least because the government says it must be.
See you guys next time. Ciao.